You're nothing but a janitor who can't even clean properly without making a mess. Professor Whitmore's words echoed through Harvard's prestigious linguistics department that fateful morning. But what he didn't know was that the man he was humiliating held secrets that would shake the very foundation of everything he believed about intelligence, worth, and human dignity. Marcus Johnson had been invisible to everyone around him for years, quietly cleaning their offices while they discussed complex linguistic theories. Little did they know, he understood every word in languages they couldn't even pronounce. What happens next will leave you questioning everything you think you know about judging others. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The first rays of dawn crept through the tall windows of Harvard University's Barker Center, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. At 5:30 a.m., the building was silent except for the gentle swish of a mop and the quiet humming of Marcus Johnson as he began his daily routine. At 49, Marcus moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had perfected his craft over countless mornings. His dark hands, weathered but steady, guided the mop in smooth, methodical strokes across the linguistics department's hallways. Each movement was deliberate, respectful of the prestigious institution he served. Marcus had been Harvard's night janitor for 7 years, invisible to most who passed him during their busy academic lives. Students hurried past without acknowledgement, professors discussed their research as if he weren't there, and administrators treated him as part of the furniture. But Marcus saw everything. He observed the passionate debates between graduate students, the frustration of professors struggling with grant applications, the excitement of breakthrough discoveries. His keen eyes missed nothing, though he kept his observations to himself. As he cleaned Professor Whitmore's office, Marcus noticed the scattered papers on the desk. Ancient linguistic texts, translation attempts, research notes written in multiple languages. His eyes briefly scanned the documents, and a slight smile crossed his face. The professor's Latin translation had several errors that Marcus could have corrected in seconds. He carefully straightened the papers, ensuring everything was exactly as he found it. Years of experience had taught him that his job was to clean, not to think, not to contribute, certainly not to correct the work of Harvard's esteemed faculty. Marcus finished the office and moved on, his cartwheel squeaking softly down the corridor. Another day was beginning at one of the world's most prestigious universities, and once again he would remain invisible, unnoticed, Little did anyone know that the man they overlooked possessed knowledge that would soon turn their academic world upside down. Professor Richard Whitmore adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and surveyed the conference room filled with his colleagues. At 57, he commanded respect in Harvard's linguistics department, his reputation built on decades of research and numerous published papers. His medium build and graying hair gave him a distinguished appearance that matched his academic stature. "The enrollment numbers are concerning," Dr. Patricia Hayes, the department head, announced, spreading charts across the mahogany table. "We're down 15% from last year, and our grant applications aren't performing as well as expected." Whitmore leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Perhaps students today simply lack the intellectual rigor required for serious linguistic study," he said with a dismissive wave. "We shouldn't lower our standards to accommodate mediocrity." Several colleagues nodded in agreement, though some shifted uncomfortably at his tone. Whitmore had always been known for his high standards and equally high opinion of himself. "Our latest grant proposal was rejected again," Dr. Hayes continued. "The review board cited concerns about our research methodology and questioned our team's expertise in certain ancient languages." "Preposterous," Whitmore scoffed. "I've been studying Indo-European linguistics for over 2 decades. These review boards are populated by inferior minds who can't appreciate sophisticated research." Through the glass door, Marcus could be seen slowly mopping the hallway, his movements quiet and unobtrusive. None of the professors paid him any attention as he worked just outside their meeting. We need to diversify our research approach, suggested Dr. Martinez, a younger faculty member. Perhaps collaborate with international scholars or bring in fresh perspectives. Whitmore's face reddened slightly. Fresh perspectives? Dr. Martinez, Harvard's linguistics department, has maintained its excellence precisely because we don't chase every academic fad. We stick to proven methods and rigorous scholarship. The meeting continued for another hour, with Whitmore dominating the discussion, dismissing suggestions and reinforcing his belief that their department's struggles were due to external factors rather than any shortcomings in their approach. As the professors filed out, none noticed Marcus emptying the wastebasket nearby, having quietly absorbed every word of their conversation. 3 days later, Marcus pushed his cleaning cart past the faculty lounge, where heated voices drew his attention. Through the partially open door, he could see Professor Whitmore gesticulating animatedly at his colleagues. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Whitmore declared, waving a rejection letter. "The National Humanities Foundation has turned down our proposal for the 3rd time. They claim our translation of the Venetic inscriptions is questionable and our methodology outdated." Dr. Hayes rubbed her temples wearily. "Richard, perhaps we should consider bringing in a consultant, someone with expertise in pre-Roman European languages." "A consultant?" Whitmore's voice rose indignantly. "I am the expert. I've published 17 papers on ancient European linguistics. These bureaucrats wouldn't recognize scholarly excellence if it hit them in the face." Marcus continued dusting the hallway fixtures, moving closer to better hear the conversation. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed keen interest. "The problem is the Venetic texts," admitted Dr. Rodriguez, a junior professor. "We're struggling with the archaic forms. The syntax doesn't follow typical Indo-European patterns." "Perhaps that's because Venetic had significant substrate influence from pre-Indo-European languages," Whitmore stated authoritatively, though his tone suggested more confidence than actual knowledge. Marcus paused in his cleaning, a slight frown crossing his brow. He knew that interpretation was incorrect. Venetic inscriptions actually showed clear italic characteristics, with minimal substrate influence. The professor was fundamentally misunderstanding the linguistic evolution. "We need this grant," Dr. Hayes said desperately. "The university is pressuring us to show results. If we can't secure funding, they might consider consolidating our department." The word consolidation hung in the air like a threat. Everyone knew it was academic euphemism for elimination. "I refuse to compromise the integrity of my research," Whitmore proclaimed. "If these grant committees can't appreciate serious scholarship, that's their failing, not ours." Dr. Martinez cleared his throat nervously. "What if we approached this differently? Maybe looked for someone who specializes in italic languages, someone who might see patterns we're missing." "Nonsense," Whitmore snapped. "We have all the expertise we need right here. I didn't spend 30 years studying at Harvard and Oxford to be told I need help from some outside so-called expert." Marcus's cleaning slowed as he processed Whitmore's mention of Oxford. Memories flickered across his face, memories of dreaming spires, ancient libraries, and his own time walking those same halls decades ago, when his future looked very different. The conversation continued, but Marcus had heard enough. He knew exactly what was wrong with their translation, could probably solve their grant problems in an afternoon. But who would listen to a janitor? The following Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Marcus's subdued mood as he entered Professor Whitmore's office for his weekly deep cleaning. The professor sat hunched over his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers, dictionaries, and reference books, muttering angrily at his computer screen. Marcus worked quietly, vacuuming the corners and dusting the bookshelves lined with linguistic texts. He moved with practiced silence, having learned long ago to be invisible during his work. Professor Whitmore suddenly stood up, frustration evident in every line of his body. "This is impossible," he exclaimed to no one in particular. "These Venetic inscriptions make no sense. The grammar is completely inconsistent." As Marcus maneuvered around the desk to empty the wastebasket, his cartwheel caught on a loose edge of the Persian rug. The sudden jolt sent papers flying from Whitmore's desk, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. "What have you done?" Whitmore's voice exploded through the office. His face turned red with rage as he stared at his carefully organized research now spread across the floor. "You clumsy fool! Do you have any idea how important these documents are?" Marcus immediately dropped to his knees, frantically gathering the scattered papers. "I'm so sorry, Professor. I'm so sorry. Let me fix this right away." "Sorry?" Whitmore's voice dripped with contempt. "Sorry doesn't restore hours of careful organization. These are irreplaceable research materials, not garbage you can just sweep up." Other faculty members began appearing in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Dr. Hayes, Dr. Martinez, and several graduate students watched the scene unfold. "Look at this mess," Whitmore continued his tirade, gesturing wildly at Marcus still kneeling on the floor. "This is what happens when we allow unqualified people into academic spaces. You clearly don't understand the value of intellectual work." Marcus kept his head down, carefully collecting each paper, his hands shaking slightly. "I understand, Professor. I'm very sorry. I'll be more careful." "More careful?" Whitmore laughed bitterly. "You people always promise to be more careful, but you never change. You're nothing but a janitor who can't even clean properly without making a mess." The silence in the hallway was deafening. Graduate students exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dr. Hayes shifted uneasily but said nothing. Marcus stood slowly, papers neatly stacked in his hands. His dignity remained intact despite the humiliation. "Where would you like me to place these, Professor?" Whitmore snatched the papers away. "Just get out, and next time pay attention to what you're doing instead of wandering around like you belong here." Marcus nodded quietly, gathered his cleaning supplies, and left the office. The assembled crowd dispersed quickly, avoiding eye contact, pretending they hadn't witnessed the ugly scene. The incident in Professor Whitmore's office became the talk of the linguistics department within hours. Marcus continued his work with quiet dignity, but whispers followed him wherever he went. "Did you see how he scattered Whitmore's research everywhere?" whispered Jessica, a second-year graduate student, to her study partner near the student lounge. "I heard Whitmore screaming from 3 offices away," replied David, shaking his head. "The guy must be completely clueless about where he is. You don't mess around with important academic work." Marcus pushed his cart past them, pretending not to hear their conversation. Their words stung more than Professor Whitmore's angry outburst had. "My advisor says the janitor has been here for years," Jessica continued, lowering her voice as Marcus passed. "You'd think he'd have learned to be more careful by now." People just don't get it," David replied with a shrug. "They don't understand they're in the presence of real intellectual work. It's probably all just meaningless papers to him." In the faculty break room, the conversation wasn't much kinder. Dr. Rodriguez stirred his coffee thoughtfully as Dr. Martinez recounted the morning's events. "Richard was pretty harsh," Dr. Martinez observed. "The man made a simple mistake." "Perhaps," Dr. Rodriguez replied diplomatically, "but we do need to maintain certain standards. These research materials represent years of work." Just then Professor Whitmore entered the break room, still visibly agitated. "Has anyone seen the maintenance supervisor? I want to file a formal complaint about that janitor's carelessness." Richard Hayes said carefully. "Perhaps we could handle this internally." The man seemed genuinely sorry. "Sorry doesn't fix damaged research," Whitmore snapped. "Some people simply don't belong in academic environments. They lack the intellectual capacity to understand what we do here." Marcus appeared in the doorway to empty the trash, and the room fell silent, Whitmore's eyes fixed on him with obvious disdain. "Well, speak of the devil," Whitmore said coldly. "I trust you'll be more careful around important work in the future." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied quietly, his voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. "Good," Whitmore continued, "because some of us are engaged in serious scholarship that requires respect and understanding, qualities that seem to be in short supply among the help these days." Marcus finished his task and left without another word, but the damage was done. The message was clear. He was unwelcome, unworthy, and unwanted in their world of higher learning. That evening, Marcus was cleaning the linguistics department's main corridor when his cell phone buzzed urgently. He glanced around, ensuring he was alone before answering quietly. "Prompto Marco qui," he said softly in perfect Italian, his voice taking on warmth that had been absent all day. The conversation continued rapidly in Italian, as Marcus explained he was at work and couldn't speak loudly. His fluency was remarkable, not the stilted phrases of a language learner, but the natural flow of someone completely comfortable in the tongue. "Sa capisco la situazione," he continued, concern evident in his voice. "Dimmi cosa ha detto il dottore esattamente." As he listened, Marcus's expression grew more serious. His elderly neighbor, Mrs. Benedetti, was having complications from her heart surgery, and her grandson couldn't understand the doctor's explanations. "Non ti preoccupare, Alessandro. Sarò lì domani mattina presto per parlare con I medici," Marcus assured him, switching effortlessly between formal and informal registers as he spoke to the worried grandson. The conversation shifted briefly to Portuguese as Mrs. Benedetti's Brazilian caregiver joined the call. Marcus's transition was seamless, discussing medical terminology and care instructions with professional precision. "Na se preoccupe, eu vou explicar tudo para o Alessandro. A senafora Benedetti vai ficar bem," he said gently, his voice carrying the authority of someone who understood both the medical situation and the cultural dynamics at play. After hanging up, Marcus stood quietly in the empty hallway for a moment. In the space of 10 minutes, he had served as translator, mediator, and counselor for a family in crisis, using skills that none of his Harvard colleagues could imagine he possessed. He resumed his cleaning, but his mind wandered to Mrs. Benedetti, who had emigrated from Italy 60 years ago and still struggled with medical English. In his neighborhood, Marcus was known as the man who could help anyone communicate with anyone else. Families sought him out when they needed someone to translate at hospitals, schools, or government offices. His phone buzzed again, this time a text in Arabic from a Somali family whose son was struggling in school. The Denenshaw texted back, promising to help tomorrow, God willing. As Marcus finished the hallway and moved toward the next section, he passed Professor Whitmore's office. Through the glass door he could see the professor still hunched over those troublesome Venetic inscriptions, looking more frustrated than ever. Marcus paused for just a moment, looking at the scattered papers and reference books. In his head, he could hear the correct pronunciation of the ancient words, could see the grammatical patterns that were eluding the professor. The solutions were so clear to him, yet so impossible to share. He pushed his cart onward, carrying his secrets into the night. Professor Whitmore's frustration had reached a breaking point. For 3 weeks he had been wrestling with a particularly complex Venetic inscription that held the key to his grant application. The ancient text seemed to mock him from his computer screen, its meaning dancing just beyond his grasp. Marcus entered the office for his regular cleaning, moving quietly around the professor's workspace. Whitmore barely acknowledged his presence, too absorbed in his linguistic puzzle to notice anything else. "Impossible," Whitmore muttered, running his hands through his thinning hair. "The morphological structure makes no sense. This can't be standard italic evolution." Marcus continued dusting the bookshelves, but his ears perked up at the professor's words. From the corner of his eye, he could see the inscription displayed on the computer screen. His cleaning slowed almost imperceptibly as he processed what he was seeing. The text was a funeral inscription from the 3rd century BCE. Whitmore was interpreting it as a simple memorial, but Marcus could see immediately that it was actually a complex legal document, transferring property rights, a type of inscription that followed very specific formulaic patterns. "The genitive forms are all wrong," Whitmore continued his monologue. "Either this inscription is corrupt, or my understanding of Venetic grammar is fundamentally flawed." Marcus moved closer to empty the wastebasket near the desk. The professor's translation was displayed on a second monitor, and Marcus had to suppress a wince at the errors. Whitmore was treating archaic legal terminology as personal names, and completely missing the document's juridical nature. "Sarah, could you come in here?" Whitmore called to his secretary in the outer office. Sarah appeared in the doorway, notepad ready. "Yes, Professor. I need you to contact the university library again, see if they have any additional resources on Venetic legal terminology, and check with other universities. Maybe someone has published something I've missed." "Of course," Sarah replied. "By the way, Professor, I've been meaning to mention something odd. Yesterday, when I was filing documents in the supply closet, I heard someone speaking what sounded like multiple foreign languages. Very fluently, too. I think it was coming from the janitor's area." Whitmore looked up with mild interest. "Probably just music or a radio program. These maintenance workers often listen to foreign broadcasts." "I didn't sound like music," Sarah persisted. "It sounded like actual conversations, and the person was switching between different languages mid-sentence." "Don't be ridiculous," Whitmore dismissed with a wave. "The janitor speaking multiple languages? What's next? Are you going to tell me he has a PhD in linguistics?" Both of them laughed at the absurd notion. Marcus continued his work silently, his expression carefully neutral despite the burning sensation in his chest. "Anyway," Whitmore returned to his problem, "see what you can find. This inscription is crucial to my research, and I'm running out of time before the grant deadline." As Sarah left, Marcus finished his cleaning and prepared to move on. For just a moment, he paused near the computer screen, his eyes quickly scanning the Venetic text one more time. The solution was so simple, so obvious. The inscription wasn't corrupted at all. It was a perfectly preserved example of Venetic legal language, following patterns that Marcus had studied extensively during his doctoral work at Oxford. He could translate it accurately in minutes. But he was just the janitor, invisible and ignored. His knowledge would remain locked away, useless to everyone, including the professor who desperately needed it. It was nearly midnight when Professor Whitmore finally admitted defeat. The Venetic inscription had consumed his entire evening, and his grant application deadline loomed just 2 days away. His office was a chaos of open books, scattered papers, and empty coffee cups. Evidence of his desperate struggle with the ancient text. Marcus arrived for his late-night cleaning shift to find Whitmore still at his desk, head in hands, looking utterly defeated. The professor's usual arrogance had crumbled into exhausted desperation. 30 years, Whitmore muttered to himself. 30 years of linguistic study, and I can't crack one simple inscription. Marcus began his cleaning routine quietly, trying not to disturb the professor's brooding. But as he emptied the wastebasket, he couldn't help but glance at the computer screen showing the troublesome Venetic text. "Nothing makes sense," Whitmore continued his monologue, apparently needing to voice his frustration. "The morphology, the syntax, it's like they're speaking a completely different language." Marcus paused in his cleaning. Something in the professor's defeated tone touched him. Despite the humiliation he'd endured, he felt a surprising surge of sympathy for the struggling academic. "Professor," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Whitmore looked up, startled. He had forgotten the janitor was even there. "What?" Marcus hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The inscription you're working on? It's not a memorial." Whitmore stared at him in confusion. "What did you say?" "The Venetic text," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "You're interpreting it as a funeral inscription, but it's actually a legal document, a property transfer." The professor's mouth fell open. "How do you... What are you talking about?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was crossing a line he could never uncross. "The word you're reading as beloved son is actually a legal term meaning inheritor, and the phrase you think is describing the deceased's virtues is a standard formula for transferring land right." Whitmore shot to his feet, his chair rolling backward. "That's impossible. You're a janitor. You can't possibly understand ancient Venetic." "The genitive forms follow the pattern established in the Padua tablets," Marcus continued calmly. "If you read it as a legal document rather than a memorial, the grammar becomes perfectly clear." "This is insane," Whitmore whispered, but he was already turning to his computer. "How could you possibly know about the Padua tablets?" Marcus moved closer to the desk, his years of hiding finally coming to an end. Because I spent 4 years studying them at Oxford, along with every other significant Venetic inscription in existence. The professor stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Oxford? You studied at Oxford? I have a PhD in comparative Indo-European linguistics, Marcus said simply. I specialized in Italic languages with particular focus on pre-Roman inscriptional evidence. The silence in the office was deafening. Whitmore looked from Marcus to the computer screen and back again. His world suddenly tilted off its axis. That's not possible, he stammered. You're the janitor. Yes, Marcus replied with quiet dignity. I'm also a linguist. Professor Whitmore sank into his chair, staring at Marcus as if he were seeing a ghost. The office felt charged with electricity, the air thick with revelation and disbelief. This is impossible, Whitmore repeated, shaking his head. You clean floors, you empty trash cans, you can't have a PhD from Oxford. Marcus pulled a small, worn wallet from his pocket and extracted a faded identification card. He placed it gently on the desk. Dr. Marcus Nathaniel Johnson, Oxford University, class of 1998. Whitmore picked up the card with trembling fingers, studying the photograph of a younger Marcus in academic regalia. The resemblance was unmistakable. I don't understand, the professor whispered. You have a doctorate from Oxford? What are you doing here? Why are you working as a janitor? Marcus sat down in the chair across from the desk the first time he had ever sat in a professor's office at Harvard. It's a long story, Professor, one that began with hope and ended with circumstances beyond my control. Tell me, Whitmore said, his voice barely audible. Marcus looked out the window at the dark campus before beginning. I came to America in 1999, fresh from Oxford, ready to change the world through linguistics. I had job offers from 3 universities, including one here at Harvard. Life happened, Marcus replied simply. My mother fell ill just as I was starting my career, cancer. I took time off to care for her, thinking it would be temporary, but the treatment was expensive and my academic position couldn't wait indefinitely. Whitmore listened in stunned silence as Marcus continued. After she died, I discovered she had mortgaged everything to pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. I lost the house, my savings, everything. By then the academic positions had been filled and the job market had shifted. But surely with your credentials. You'd think so, Marcus said with a sad smile. But gaps in academic careers are hard to explain. Years passed and I needed work immediately to survive. Janitor positions were available and they paid enough to keep me housed and fed while I looked for something better. 7 years, Whitmore said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. 7 years of applications, interviews, and rejections. Sometimes I got close, but there was always someone with a more recent publication record, someone without unexplained gaps in their CV. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Whitmore several language apps and translation programs. I've stayed current with my field as much as possible. I translate documents for immigrant families in my neighborhood, help with legal paperwork, medical forms. I speak 9 languages fluently: Italian, Portuguese, Arabic, Mandarin, German, French, Spanish, and Latin, plus English. Language has always been my gift, Marcus said. Even as a child in Detroit, I picked up languages from the diverse community around me. It's what led me to linguistics in the first place. The professor sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. The Venetic inscription. You really can translate it? Would you like me to show you? Marcus rose and moved to the computer. His fingers moved confidently across the keyboard as he began typing a new translation. Within minutes, the ancient legal document revealed its secrets. Property boundaries, inheritance laws, witness requirements, all preserved in the formal language of Venetic legal practice. Whitmore watched in amazement as the mysterious and transformed from incomprehensible puzzle to clear, detailed legal document. This is incredible, he breathed. This is exactly what my grant application needed. Professor Whitmore spent the entire night poring over Marcus's translation, cross-referencing it with other Venetic inscriptions and comparative legal documents from ancient Italy. By dawn, he was convinced that he was looking at groundbreaking work that would revolutionize understanding of pre-Roman legal systems. At precisely 8:00 a.m., He knocked on Department Head Dr. Hayes's office door, carrying a folder thick with printouts and notes. "Patricia, I need to speak with you immediately," he said, his voice urgent with excitement. "It's about the Venetic grant application." Dr. Hayes looked up from her morning coffee, surprised by Whitmore's uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "Richard, you look like you haven't slept all night. What's going on?" "I haven't slept, and for good reason," Whitmore replied, spreading documents across her desk. "I've solved the Venetic inscription problem, but more importantly, I've discovered something extraordinary about our janitor." "Our janitor?" Raised an eyebrow. "Richard, are you feeling all right?" "Look at this translation," Whitmore continued, ignoring her concern. "It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Marcus, our night janitor." Dr. Hayes examined the documents, her expression growing more puzzled. "I don't understand. How does the janitor factor into your research?" "Has a Ph.D. in comparative Indo-European linguistics from Oxford," Whitmore announced. "He specializes in exactly the areas where our department has been struggling." The department head stared at him in silence for a long moment. "Richard, I think you need some sleep. You're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense," Whitmore insisted, pulling out Marcus's faded Oxford ID card. "Dr. Marcus Johnson, class of 1998. I verified his credentials online this morning. His doctoral dissertation on Italic legal terminology was groundbreaking work." Dr. Hayes studied the identification card carefully, then looked up at Whitmore with growing amazement. "This is real?" "Completely real. Patricia, we have been overlooking a linguistic genius for 7 years, a man who could solve problems that have been plaguing our department, who could bring expertise we desperately need." "Why is he working as a janitor?" Whitmore explained Marcus's story, the family illness, financial devastation, career gaps, and years of unsuccessful job applications. Dr. Hayes listened with increasing fascination and growing horror at their collective blindness. "We need him," Whitmore continued. "The university is breathing down our necks about grant funding and research output. Marcus could be our salvation." "Are you proposing?" "I want to bring him to next week's International Conference on Ancient European Languages. Let him present his Venetic research. Show the academic community what we've discovered." Dr. Hayes leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. "Richard, if you're right about this, it changes everything. But if you're wrong, we'll be the laughingstock of the academic world." "Not wrong," Whitmore said firmly. "I spent the night testing his knowledge. He's legitimate, Patricia, more than legitimate. He's exceptional. The conference is in 5 days. We'd need to register him, arrange accommodations, prepare his presentation materials." "I'll handle all of that," Whitmore interrupted. "Just give me permission to make this happen." Dr. Hayes studied the translation documents again, noting the elegant analysis and sophisticated interpretation. "What does Marcus say about all this?" "I haven't asked him yet," Whitmore admitted. "I wanted departmental approval first, but Patricia, after the way we've treated him, after the humiliation I put him through, we owe him this opportunity and much more." "You're right," Dr. Hayes said quietly. "If this is real, we have a lot to make up for." She picked up her phone and dialed the maintenance office. "This is Dr. Hayes. Could you please ask Marcus Johnson to come to my office? Tell him it's urgent but not disciplinary." As they waited, Whitmore paced nervously while Dr. Hayes reviewed the translation materials. 20 minutes later, Marcus appeared in the doorway, still wearing his maintenance uniform, uncertainty evident in his expression. "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Hayes said, rising from her chair and extending her hand. "Please, come in and sit down. We have a proposal for you." The following Monday morning transformed the linguistics department at Harvard University. Word had spread quickly about the upcoming conference presentation, and faculty members who had previously ignored Marcus now gathered in the main conference room with obvious curiosity and barely concealed amazement. Marcus stood at the front of the room, no longer wearing his janitor's uniform but dressed in a borrowed suit that Dr. Hayes had insisted he accept. His presentation materials were displayed on the large screen, showing his comprehensive analysis of Venetic legal inscriptions. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hayes began. "I'd like to introduce Dr. Marcus Johnson, who will be representing our department at this week's International Conference on Ancient European Languages." The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Graduate students who had mocked Marcus just days earlier now stared in disbelief. Faculty members who had treated him as invisible furniture struggled to process this dramatic reversal. Dr. Johnson's research on Venetic legal terminology represents a significant breakthrough in our understanding of pre-Roman Italian legal systems, Dr. Hayes continued. His work will undoubtedly influence future scholarship in this field. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and confident as he began his presentation. The Venetic inscriptions from Padua and Este have long puzzled scholars because they were interpreted within the wrong contextual framework. When we understand these texts as legal documents rather than simple memorials, their linguistic patterns become clear. For the next 45 minutes, Marcus demonstrated mastery that left his audience speechless. He moved effortlessly between ancient languages, explained complex grammatical constructions, and revealed insights that had eluded scholars for decades. Professor Martinez, who had dismissed Marcus just a week earlier, raised his hand tentatively. "Dr. Johnson, your analysis of the morphological patterns is fascinating. Have you considered applying similar methodology to Mesopic inscriptions?" "Actually," Marcus replied with a slight smile, "I've been working on exactly that problem. The Mesopic legal texts show interesting parallels with Venetic formulaic language, suggesting broader Italic legal traditions." The questions continued for another 30 minutes, each answer revealing new depths of Marcus's knowledge. Dr. Rodriguez asked about comparative Celtic legal terminology. Dr. Kim inquired about connections to Latin legal language. Marcus answered each question with scholarly precision that would have impressed academics at any university in the world. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Faculty members stood clapping enthusiastically. Graduate students who had whispered cruel jokes about the help now applauded a scholar whose expertise exceeded their own. Professor Whitmore rose from his seat in the back of the room. "Before we conclude," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room, "I have something to say." The room fell silent as Whitmore walked to the front, stopping directly in front of Marcus. "Dr. Johnson, I owe you an apology." Marcus started to speak, but Whitmore held up his hand. "Please let me finish. I treated you with disrespect, contempt, and cruelty. I judged you based on your job rather than your character or capabilities. I was wrong, shamefully and completely wrong." The professor's voice broke slightly as he continued. "You had every reason to let me fail with that translation. Instead, you helped me, despite how I had treated you. That speaks to a character and professionalism that puts me to shame." "Professor Whitmore," Marcus began gently, "we all make mistakes." "This wasn't a mistake," Whitmore interrupted. "This was prejudice, plain and simple, and I'm not the only one who needs to acknowledge that." He turned to address the entire room. "All of us participated in making Dr. Johnson invisible. We treated a brilliant scholar like he was beneath our notice because he cleaned our offices instead of teaching in them." The silence in the room was profound and uncomfortable. Several faculty members looked down at their hands, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, "Which brings me to our final announcement. The department would like to offer Dr. Johnson an adjunct professor position, effective immediately." 6 months later, Professor Marcus Johnson walked through the corridors of Harvard's linguistics department with measured steps and quiet confidence. Students nodded respectfully as he passed, and colleagues greeted him with genuine warmth. The transformation was complete, yet Marcus hadn't forgotten where he came from. His office, once Professor Whitmore's domain, now displayed his Oxford diploma alongside translations of ancient texts in multiple languages. But the most treasured item on his desk was a small framed photo of his mother, whose sacrifices had led him down this unexpected path. "Professor Johnson," a young graduate student knocked on his open door, "I'm struggling with the Oscan inscription assignment. Could you help me?" "Of course, Jennifer, come in," Marcus replied, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Let's take a look at what's giving you trouble." As they worked through the ancient text together, Marcus heard familiar sounds in the hallway. The quiet swish of a mop, the gentle squeak of cartwheels. He glanced up to see Carlos, the new night janitor, methodically cleaning the corridor. "Excuse me for just a moment," Marcus told Jennifer, then stepped into the hallway. "Buenas noches, Carlos," he said warmly in Spanish. "Como er su familia?" Carlos looked up in surprise and pleasure. "Muy bien, Profesor Johnson. Mi hijo empezó en la universidad las Q maravilloso. Tell him if he needs any help with his studies, my door is always open." "Gracias, Profesor. Usted muy amable." Marcus returned to his office, where Jennifer was waiting with obvious curiosity. "You speak Spanish with the janitor?" "I speak Spanish with Carlos," Marcus corrected gently. "He's working nights to support his son's college education. Language is meant to build bridges, not walls." Their tutoring session continued for another hour, with Marcus patiently guiding Jennifer through the complexities of Oscan grammar. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Professor Johnson, can I ask you something personal?" "Certainly." "Weren't you the janitor here before? Some of the older students mentioned it, but I wasn't sure if it was true." Marcus smiled. "Yes, I was, for 7 years. They must have been difficult." "I was educational," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "It taught me that intelligence and worth aren't determined by job titles. Every person in this building, faculty, students, staff, maintenance workers, has value and dignity that deserves respect." Jennifer nodded seriously. "I'll remember that." After she left, Marcus worked late into the evening, preparing for his presentation at Oxford the following month. The university had invited him to deliver the annual lecture in comparative linguistics, a homecoming that would complete the circle of his remarkable journey. Professor Whitmore appeared in his doorway around 10 o'clock. "Still here, Marcus?" "Finishing up. How's your new research progressing?" "Brilliantly, thanks to your collaboration," Whitmore replied. "The Grand Committee was impressed by our joint proposal." They had become genuine colleagues and, surprisingly, friends. Whitmore's transformation had been as dramatic as Marcus's recognition, leading to a partnership that was producing groundbreaking research. "I wanted to thank you again," Whitmore said, "not just for the academic collaboration, but for showing me who I really was and who I could become instead." Marcus looked up from his papers. "We all have the capacity to grow, Richard. The question is whether we're willing to do the work." As Whitmore left for the evening, Marcus returned to his preparation. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to bridge the gaps between languages and people. Outside his window, the lights of Harvard University twinkled in the darkness, illuminating a place where dreams could die and be reborn, where invisible people could suddenly be seen, and where the content of one's character could finally triumph over the color of one's uniform. Dr. Marcus Johnson, once invisible janitor, now respected professor, continued his work into the night, living proof that brilliance can shine through any circumstances, and that it's never too late for recognition, redemption, and new beginnings. Dear friend, Marcus Johnson's story reminds us that brilliance exists in every corner of our world, often hidden behind assumptions and prejudices we don't even realize we carry. Every day we encounter janitors, cashiers, drivers, and service workers who may possess extraordinary talents, wisdom, and experiences we never take time to discover. The next time you interact with someone society deems invisible, remember that their current job doesn't define their worth, intelligence, or potential contributions to our world. Take a moment to see them as a complete human being with their own remarkable story. Share this powerful reminder by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more inspiring stories that challenge us to look beyond surface appearances and recognize the inherent dignity and potential in every person we meet.